Welcome. Good morning. This is Fountain Street Church on the air, I suppose, here in Grand Rapids. We would be wise, I guess, to call it WFSC in some ways, because we are now an electronic church as we make our way through the COVID-19 health crisis. And we are serving you in all the ways we can, and you'll learn more about them later. I'm Fred Wooden. I'm the senior minister here, along with my clergy colleague, Christopher Rowe, our minister of spiritual life and learning. And together with Phil Pletcher, our pianist, and thank you, Phil, for giving us that Mendelssohn. I asked for Mendelssohn especially this week because originally we were actually going to have a live piece of Mendelssohn played here by members of the Grand Rapids Symphony, but as the crisis became more anxiety-ridden, they decided that they would sooner not, and I have to respect that. We live in very different times. But you brought the Mendelssohn with you, Phil. Thank you so much. And we are here in as many ways as we can to provide a connection for those feeling physically isolated but in spiritual need, and a place where they can free their mind and grow their soul and change the world, which is what we try to do in all sorts of ways. In a moment, Christopher will share his thoughts this morning, reflecting on, well, you see a giant rainbow there and you see some stuff. Wow, you're going to tell us more about that, aren't you, Christopher? And I'm looking forward to that, and you will too. And I'll talk with Margi Petersen, who was helping me and helping the church as we begin new ways of connecting in these unusual times. And then I'll begin a 4-part series that leads up to Easter, and I'll be applying our famous Advent themes to this time and year. This week I'm going to be talking about faith in a time of COVID-19. But first, Christopher.
Well, good morning, everyone. I still continue to miss you all, but it's good to be with you, at least in some virtual form. You will notice that the rainbow is up. I think this is the first time all of the colors have appeared, and I'm grateful that Fred helped me with that. I think it was Thursday. We finally got it hoisted up. And we talked about this project we've been working on, which is our big, bold, radical statement of inclusion and allyship here at Fountain Street Church, not just for the LGBTQ community, but also for races and ethnicities and other religions. This is still ongoing, but it's starting to really take shape. We also candidly started talking about Noah's Ark, because there's a pretty famous rainbow in there, and Fred kind of jokingly said, well, you could always talk about that, and I kind of dismissed it, just because I thought, what would I say about Noah's Ark? But as it goes, I kept thinking about that theme, and of course I couldn't help but revisit it. And I found that it actually appears in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam in similar but diverging ways. But in all of them, it has the same story we all know. Noah tries to warn all the people of God to stray away from their sinful and evil ways, and they don't listen, and so God says, well, build this ark and get the people who believe to come into this ark with you. And so we know how the story goes. The world gets rained out, the ark goes on, and eventually God sends a rainbow that says, sorry about that, I won't do that again. And through all that myth and allegory, I think we know that there's other messages we can take from it. And I don't know about you or you this week, but I've been feeling pretty insufficient. And so when I thought about this story and this rainbow and this reminder, I felt like it was an invitation to seek beauty, even in the craziest of times. If you go back and look at the text, it even says, when the clouds are out and you see a bow, that's a reminder of my covenant. Well, I see that as, even in the craziest, darkest, wettest, cloudiest, most isolated, insufficient times, seek beauty. And I think that that's about all I feel like I'm prepared to do right now. I admitted to Fred, I don't feel as cool and as ready to record all these videos and live updates like my colleagues are. I don't feel like I'm ready to reach out to every single person and say, how can I help you? Because I feel like I'm still trying to help myself some days. But I can still seek beauty. And I think this rainbow is a bold invitation to that. And so I started making cranes, little paper cranes. And I put them into a rainbow format, but they could be anything. It's just a tangible way to try to seek beauty. And we've got our tower ringing beautiful music now, and there's an infinite host of ways we can all seek beauty. And so I want to invite everybody to join me on that quest, where even when you don't feel like you're ready to face whatever the day's throwing at us or the week or the month, you can still seek beauty. So look for more information on how you can help us all seek beauty here. We're going to work on a big collaborative project that you'll hear about soon, but not today. And we're going to work on seeking beauty together.
Well, thanks, Christopher. Things are always changing now, so we should think of those changes as being hopeful, not just anxious. And not just seek beauty, you're creating it. I think in some ways, creating beauty, even if it's only for yourself, is a powerful way to assert your humanity in an inhumane time. Appreciate it. I'm going to get you to change places with Margi Dirks, who's going to join me up here. You mentioned, Christopher, covenant. In the biblical story, God makes a covenant with humans saying, I won't send a flood again. And it's a promise, and promises are what hold people together. A church is in some ways a covenanted community. It says, when I join this group, I'm promising to support them and asking for support in return. It's a collective endeavor. And that's one of the reasons why Margi called me last week. Remind people what happened earlier this week.
Well, when things started shutting down and it became obvious that the older people especially were going to have to be cut off from their usual lines of social activity, I got to thinking that the church as a community was the perfect setup to help these people, but somehow they had to know that we were available to them. And so I left a message in the office saying that I would be happy to go out and deliver groceries, pick up prescriptions, whatever needed to be done. And then you got back to me and said, let's go through our list of members and see who in particular might appreciate a call.
Mm-hmm. And now, you have not a unique but unusual history here. You grew up in this church.
I did. I started here in 5th grade. My dad had recently left the Methodist Church, which I had grown up in to that point, and my mom had already been coming here for a year because her aunt and uncle had attended Fountain Street for some time.
And they were still active here when I arrived 15 years ago.
Yeah, well, Esther was at least, Esther
yeah.
the Archangel, yeah. And so I came here in 5th grade, and I've been involved with this institution ever since.
So when we sat down and looked at these people, you were saying, oh, I remember when that was my teacher, or this person's kid and I went to camp together, something like that. So it was not just, this is the right thing to do. These were people you knew.
Yeah, and they're the people that I miss when even during regular times they're not able to come to church. People that I think about a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really wanted to reach out and help as I could.
And that's what being part of a covenanted community feels like. It isn't an obligation, oh, I should do this. It's no, I really want to do this. But we have to be organized. Getting organized is the hard part. So that's why you and I sat down. We looked at our membership directory. I said, you call them and you call them. But we also involved a group of people called the Befrienders, of which you're a member. Can you tell people about that?
Yeah, I trained as a befriender this fall, and it's a group of people who are trained and covenanted to be peer listeners, basically. They are the people you call on if you've got something you really need to talk to somebody about, and you want to make sure that it's somebody who's not going to talk to anybody else about it, and who will listen to you and let you know that they hear you, they understand what you're saying, and will help you work through it yourself. So they're not going to give you advice. That's not their job. But they are a compassionate, empathetic group of people.
Well, we could also say they are good companions, spiritual companions, especially when the road gets rough. Now, a key part of the Befriender program is we don't go looking for them, they come looking for us. But we live in very odd times. And so I prevailed upon the Befrienders to make some of these phone calls. Even though that's not their technical task, I knew they had the ears to do the calling and listening. Yeah. So about how many people have you and Befriend, how many people do you think we've been in touch with
You
so far?
gave, the list of names that I had was 66,
Yeah.
and then you had another 20 or so on top of that. I called 26 of them. I gave the other 40 to Mary Moore, who's one of the people in charge of the Befrienders, and she's divided them up among those who were able to make calls.
Yeah. And like you said, I add my own to that. And we divided them up for those that are easiest for each of us to talk to. Now, we've had a really interesting time, and I mean that without quotation marks, an interesting time talking to folks. What have you heard as you got in touch?
Well, I'm very relieved to say that most everybody I talked to said that they were well cared for and had attentive friends and family who were making sure that all their needs are met. One young couple with a number of children were just happy to know that we were thinking of them, and they're working from home and handling everything just fine. But that seemed to be the general theme, is that for the most part, I expect to hear from one or two people in the coming week about picking up some groceries because they're starting to run a little low. But other than that, people were just grateful to be reminded that their community cares about them, and we do.
We noticed that. I had a wonderful message on my answering machine saying, I never expected to hear from my minister at a time like this, but it was so sweet to hear your voice on my message machine. So often we just leave messages, but then when they collect them, it's a connection. It's not the connection we would prefer, like a hug, but it is a connection. It really is. And you mentioned groceries. We know of at least one person who is health compromised in general. So it's even harder for that person to go out. And we have to find new ways to do that work and also make sure we don't bring anything in the house with us. So we're going to be living at arm's length for a while. Now, last week I told folks that we can all do this. That is to say, we can all take part in this endeavor. If you say, well, what if someone's already been called? A second phone call is not a sin, all right? And a third would not be bad. If you know someone in this community and you haven't talked to them for a while, give them a call. And if you leave a message, believe me, that's a great thing to do. What I want you to know, though, is that if you out there and calling someone in our community, here's something that would be useful for us here in the office, as it were, for useful to Margie or to me, we should know that so that we can find the resources to meet them where they are. Whether that's more phone calls, whether that's provisions, whether it's prescriptions, whatever it is, we need to share that information. We have to be if we're in this ark, we can't physically hold hands, but we have to do that spiritually for some time. So thank you for doing that work. We're going to do more. And what I can assure you that the first 100 were the first 100. We're going to be expanding beyond that, so we stay in touch on purpose. But if you had not called, it wouldn't have gotten done. So yes, a single phone call can become a ministry in itself, not just to the person that you called, but what you did was you gave me the reason to push forward with this as a ministry. And that's true for all of us. Any one person connecting with one other person, electronically or by telephone, can make more happen than one of us can do alone. So, thank you, Margi, for doing it. We're going to continue doing this together. And thank all of you for being there. And yes, we will be at church even now. Thank you so much. We should greet each other appropriately. Now, Margi and befrienders, and probably some of you are already reaching out, as I just said. And we do it in other ways here at the church. I already do a weekday video called Midday Moments with Fred, which I don't even know what I'm doing until I do them. Andy DeBraber, our interim chapel minister, and James Hughes have created our first chapel video, which was shared this morning, and they've done other videos as well. Kim sends out her daily word, and it's a cheering word. And if you don't get that, we can send it to you. And Virginia Ansengruber, our communications office, our communications maven, an expert, sends out an evening review. We're reaching out in all the ways we can imagine. And of course, Christopher, who is developing a ministry now, has even reprogrammed our bells to play a different song at noon and 5, We Shall Overcome, which Channel 13 picked up and broadcast. And isn't that great? So we can still be a voice of hope in all ways. We all want to do more, even as we feel we can do less. And that's right turn to the ways you can still be helpful to the church, even in your homes and with your families. You may not be here in person, but the people you see here today, Philip, Margi, Christopher, and me, and our wonderful audiovisual crew, which is helping you see this right now. The building that we love so much, the messages we send, and yes, the bells, depend upon your support financially. And I know giving money isn't as satisfying as lending a hand, but right now we cannot lend a hand because we have to stay apart. So your money actually does matter, and it matters more now because it's one way you can take part. So I want you to imagine the ushers are coming down the aisle now with their plates. You could be seeing Ellen or Jack or Don or Colleen, and you'd be fishing for money in your wallet or your pocket or purse. But this morning, what you're doing is you're moving your mouse over that link in the description that says donate. Right down there below this video is a link that takes you to our webpage, and you right-click on that and you choose open a new tab so you don't have to stop watching, and you put in an amount of money. Music sounds nice, doesn't it? That's why we are here. Decide how much you're going to give, and let me let you know that it's a lot easier to click. It's as easy to click on $20 as 10, on 50 as 25. It's as easy to click on $100 as anything, and that click matters. So while you do that, I'll let Phil finish this piece of music, and then I'll be back to you with my message. You are Fountain Street Church, and we need you all to be part of our work together. Okay, it's been a tough week. Let's all admit that, yours truly included. I saw an interview with an American sequestered in Italy, a Skype interview. Those are always so flattering, looking right up your nose. And he mentioned three things. that we are all dealing with in Italy, but I think also here in America. Loneliness, fear, and uncertainty. And he said the uncertainty is the worst, and I would agree. The world seems to be changing every day in ways that we cannot anticipate. Even as our personal lives slow to a crawl, the world is tearing along faster and faster, or at least this virus is. What was reliable 2 weeks ago is no longer even thinkable. Even a week ago, we were doing things that we don't feel we should do now. We're all working from home, or wish we weren't. There are no sports to play or to watch. If we go shopping, we try to get there when no one else is there and dash down the aisles holding our breath, checking out as rapidly as we can. Socializing amounts to social media posts, a little bit of FaceTime. I don't have to give you the details. None of us can escape them. I troll the New York Times and the Washington Post too many times every day to see how many people are sick today, how many of them are in Kent County, how much my 401k is turning into a 201k. Who knew that even 2 weeks ago that the presidential campaign, with which we were already fed up, which was already weird beyond belief, who knew that the presidential campaign would be what we read about to stay calm? Just 3 days ago, I was working on this sermon. It was going to be about the Mendelssohn Octet, a beautiful piece of music I have planned for months. I had the musicians hired. They were eager to be here, and then on Thursday night, I got an email. One of the players coming from Ohio was unwilling to make the trip. And it ain't called the Mendelssohn Octet for nothing. -1, it's not happening. And what could I say? Could I say, no, make her come? Of course I couldn't do that. I am no expert in this time, and I'm as confused and as worried as everyone else. Are you wondering where to turn, what to think, how to act? Take a number. We are all doing that. So as I grasped for something, a light went on, a little light, more like a flicker of a match than an actual insight. The question is a spiritual question. In times of uncertainty, what can we rely on? Right after that question came a memory of a poet, Rainer Maria Rilke, who, in helping a young poet deal with the difficulties of life, advised him to be patient with all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Easier said than done. But it is a real question. What can we rely on? At any other time, we could think about it abstractly, have a discussion group, read the poet. But these are not such times. And remember, Rilke said, try. It was never easy, even on a good day. We religious liberals say that spirituality lives in the questions, not the answers, that it arises from the wondering, not from the knowing. If we do not do that now, if we cannot do that now, we'd better hang up our claim to be religious altogether. And that's when the flicker turned into almost a flame. Reliable, things we can depend on, is the root meaning of the word faith. Think about it. A faithful friend, a faithful dog, a faithful spouse is something you can depend on. And when you are dependable, you are the one others have faith in. Faith at its most essential and elemental level is not about asserting that creed or that faith or that belief or that doctrine. It is being dependable come hell or high water. We need to remind ourselves that faith, our faith, the liberal faith, has things we can depend on no matter what. And then the flame lit a candle. My brain was beginning to light up. That's the part I love about preaching. It animates my own soul. Faith, I remembered, is the first of our 4 Advent themes, a tradition that has been here so long that it is also as dependable as Sunday coming around every 7 days. There was something I could talk about. Faith is just one thing we need to know. It's not good enough by itself. We need hope. We need love. We need joy. The other themes of Advent, especially in this time of COVID-19. Again, if we cannot live by our faith now, if we cannot hope now, if we cannot love now, if we cannot find joy now, we should just lock this place up and get out of town. We are being tested, friends. The liberal faith is being tested. We are being asked to name, own, and claim what we believe in most deeply, what we hope for, despite all evidence to the contrary, who we love and how we love, no matter how hard it is to reach them, to find joy, even in times when the obvious means elude us. Yes, that's what we need. That's what you need me to do. That's my job. And if you think I have the answers, you're dead wrong. But I can try. What I can do is bring my spiritual struggle to you and invite you to come along with the journey. And now I'll tell you the story. The day started easily enough. 4 of us in a snug little car climbing up out of Cape Town, South Africa, to the foot of Table Mountain. The sun had not come up yet, but the sky was already turning a bit of blue. With our day packs on and our guide Johan in the lead, we started up the hill amid terrain that would look at home in New Mexico or Arizona. And I felt pretty confident. I had done this before. I had walked through New Mexico. I had climbed hills in Peru. I knew what I was doing. At a junction of trails, one led left, another led right, and another led up. There were 6 of us, 5 who had signed up with Johan and Johan himself, a wiry 20-something with a wispy beard. And we looked left and we looked right, but Johan went up. And so we followed, and by up, he meant up Table Mountain, which is all but vertical. There will be a few scrambles, he said, and I thought of the time in New Mexico when I had to crawl over a few large boulders here and there, but it turns out scramble is South African speak for rock climbing. And there before us, 5 20-somethings and 66-year-old me, was a vertical rock face. I was about to become a rock climber or turn back. Mind, only Johan had done this before. The rest of us had never been here or done that. He'd done it many times, but there we stood. Go up or go home. Put your finger in that crevice there, he told me. A crevice? There was a crevice there, and I reached up, and there was. Now, put your left foot there, pointing to a slightly smudgy spot on a rock face. Pull yourself up with the hand in the crevice, and then grab the crevice above that. Sure, I said to myself. But did I really have a choice? But it worked. It really did. Even a little bit of leverage with tips of my fingers was enough to pull me up to get my foot where it needed to be. And that foot plus that hand allowed me to reach with the other hand to the next crevice. I was rock climbing. Even a little handhold can be enough. What we depend on doesn't need to be a lot, just enough to hold on to for now. Sometimes a little is all we really need to take the next step. The first lesson of faith in a time of COVID-19 is you don't need to get to the end today, you just need to make the next step. And a small help, a little crevice of hope is really all we need most days. Several times I had to trust that Johann knew what he was doing and that I could do what he said. I now depended on him. I had to have faith in him. What's more, if he said I could do it, how could I not believe him? My courage to continue came as much from his belief in me as my belief in him. That, and I have to admit, as we were standing there at the foot of another cliff about to climb a rock, up comes someone behind us going much faster than we were, a 70-something gentleman who casually grabbed the rock and hoisted himself up, at which point I said, I think I can do this. How many times have any of us continued to do a hard task, endured a long trial, braved a fearful time, not because we knew we could do it, not because we knew we could do it, but because we knew others could do it. And therefore, we had reason to believe in ourselves more than we expected. We find faith in seeing others showing their faith in themselves. A few years earlier, I was climbing up Mount Tai in China, a very tall mountain which is actually paved with 6,000, yes, you heard that right, 6,000 stone steps from bottom to top. That's a lot of steps. And about 2/3 of the way up, as it got to the steepest point, I sat down on one of the steps. I was not alone. 2 steps away from me were a couple clearly in their 80s. And when they got up to keep going, how could I not? Who am I to languish when those supposedly weaker than me keep going? A story from long ago, back in the spring of 1983, our first child was stillborn. And we were bereft and heartsick and frightened and wondered if we would ever get over it. But then we remembered how my wife's mother had miscarried and went on to have my wife. That my mother lost a twin who was the twin of my brother, and knew at that point that many of our ancestors had endured child loss and kept going. Who were we to lose heart when they had kept theirs? When times are tough, we are tempted to question whether we can endure it or whether it's even worth enduring. For us, and I suspect for most, knowing others have endured tests before us has helped us to endure ourselves. I don't know how many support groups exist, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, others. And the people who are trying to recover are taking strength from the stories of others who have done it, fallen and gotten up and kept moving. It is not because the others have been stronger than them, it's because they've been as weak as them and yet continued onward. I did not know whether I could scale the rock wall. If I had stood at the bottom of it by myself, I would have turned around and gone back. But Johann said I could. The man running up the rock said that I could. The loss of a child said that we could do it again. Knowing our ancestors have survived, told us then, tell us now that we are stronger than we may know. 102 years ago, almost, the Spanish flu ran across the United States and even came to Grand Rapids and killed 300 people in 3 months. Far more devastating than COVID-19 is now. 3,000 people got ill with it. 10% mortality rate like we're facing now. And while it was here, they closed the churches and they closed the businesses, and people despaired of the city ever recovering. Have you been downtown recently? The city survived. The people survived. The churches survived. We learned from our ancestors that we can be strong. We have faith in them. We have been here before. All of us, if not in our congregational life, certainly in our personal life. If they could make it, who are we to say we can give up? My grandfather lost his wife the day my father was born. My father never met his mother. But they went on. He grew up. She is my ancestor. The church survived the flu epidemic. It survived the Great Depression. It survived the Great Recession. And here we are. And though the room is empty, this institution is full of its ancestors, its history, its strength, the belief that others had in it. Faith in a time of COVID-19 requires us to reach back into our personal and collective past and remember the strength of those who brought us thus far on the way, as that great song reminds us. Why did they endure, though? Why didn't they give up? They weren't fools. Here's the irony. They kept going because they believed in us, meaning the future. They hung on, not for their sake alone, but because they wanted to bequeath it to a coming generation. They had no idea who would be in this church 100 years later, but they knew someone would be here if they could hold on to what they had. My grandmother died in childbirth, not because she wanted to, but she knew surely the danger of giving birth in 1925. And women for generations, millennia, have given birth and risked their lives for the sake of bringing new life into the world. There are names under all these windows around here. I don't know their names. They don't know ours. And yet they knew someone would come along and live in this place after they were gone. They endured. My grandmother endured. We all endure, not for our ancestors, but for our descendants. Because if we are not living for something in the future, why do we bother to stay alive at all? The past is a great teacher. It says this wall can be climbed, because I saw the smudges on the rock. The present shows us that others are climbing it right now. Some of them, like me, not sure if they can, and others scrambling up because they've done it a dozen times. The future says climb that wall if you intend to get to the top, or spend the rest of your life at the bottom of this cliff. When we let the past encourage us, when we let the future encourage us, we have faith in our capacity to face any difficulty. Honestly, alone, we might be paralyzed. Alone, we might feel there's no point in even trying, but together, there is no doubt we can. There is no doubt we will. Now, I'm fully aware that the word faith generally connotes belief in something cosmic. And for most houses of faith and houses of worship, they'll be talking about belief in this or that, and I do not disparage them at all. The question is, does the liberal faith have something that big as well? Yes, but it's not in the customary sense. I do not have belief in a God that is pulling the strings. For example, one that makes sure that everything happens for a reason, or that God never gives us more than we can take. I don't like those. And I know those are important mantras for some people, but I don't like them because they come with a cost. They come with the cost of avoiding deep questions about suffering and evil, about meaning and purpose. But that does not mean nothing larger than ourselves exists or can exist. The liberal God, if I may be so bold to call it that, is a trust, faith, that truth and goodness and beauty outlast all of us. They are eternal. They are ultimately united. And when we take part in finding the truth, in nourishing goodness, in beholding beauty, we are enhancing them not only for ourselves, but for the universe, even for God. No, I honestly don't expect something that would be called immortality. I don't know for sure, but that's not why I'm in the religion business. but I have an unproven faith that whatever is true and good and beautiful is immortal, will outlast me, will be present and hold together a universe that seems to be falling apart. Do I know this for sure? Of course not. That's why we call it faith, not knowledge. But would you go into tomorrow thinking that all of it is meaningless? Would you volunteer to suffer what must be suffered sometimes if the beauty of the world were merely pleasure and the goodness was evanescent? No, we have to believe that truth and goodness and beauty are immortal, are eternal, and that when we connect with them, we momentarily have a place in eternity ourselves. Could there be more than this? Perhaps. But I will accept nothing less than this as my faith. And oddly enough, even in the Christian scriptures, we have an example of just that. Its unsigned author is probably the deaconess Priscilla, who in the book of Hebrews tries to encourage people's faith by listing all of those who've gone before, starting with Cain and Abel up to Moses and beyond, listing all the works they did and all the struggles they endured, each of them having faith and none of them receiving what was promised. That is not to be discouraged, though, because they believed they were taking part in something larger than themselves, that they had a stake in a covenant with their God, as we have a stake in this covenant with each other. That was worth living for. She writes, "These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. Neither will we. They toiled in faith, we toil in faith. They lived for a future they did not see. We live for a future we will not see. Like my grandmother and all those untold millions of women who died giving life. Like innumerable young men and women who have died in wars to protect family. If so many in the past can have so much faith in the future, we betray them if we do not share and claim our faith in a future as well. We don't have to know it. We just have to know it could happen. Back along the mountain, pushed from behind, encouraged alongside, knowing the summit was ahead, I kept climbing. We crawled onto the summit, a great flat place that was, to our somewhat surprised faces, was teeming with tourists already who had come up on the cable car. They were strolling back and forth, having a lovely Sunday afternoon. We arrived, panting and sweating from our last burst to get to the top, on hands and knees as we crawled over the edge, looking quite foolish to them, I'm sure. But we turned around and gazed down the slope and traced the path we had followed. We saw others behind us coming up, waved to them as we waved and we came up. If they can do it, so can I. And then we looked out from the top of Table Mountain, and we took in the Atlantic Ocean. We strained to see the Cape of Good Hope off in the haze to the south. It was a little bit like that story of Moses on Mount Pisgah. We saw the world laid out before us, the end of land, the continuity of seas, the expanse of sky, the smell of the atmosphere as it warmed. Faith in the time of COVID-19 means we are climbing a steep slope. We do not know the path ahead, but we know there is a path because we're not the first ones to follow it. And because there is a path created by our ancestors, we believe that they went toward a future worth climbing for. If they who went before us had the courage to go to the top, who are we to stop here? Compassed about by such a cloud of witnesses, Priscilla writes, Let us run with perseverance the race marked out before us. You ever run a race, say in middle school or high school? If you ever were in a competitive sport, you know that the cheering of the crowd somehow gives you more energy than when you're by yourself. You find strength you did not know you had. Our ancestors are cheering. They're saying, go. Keep going. We gave you the baton. We know you can do it. And we look ahead and we see that ahead lies a time, not a place, a time when this church will have new people in it. We have the baton in our hands. Can we stop now knowing their hand is waiting for us to give it to them? That's what faith means. Taking strength from those who went before, knowing that those waiting for us are depending upon us. No, I do not know what lies ahead in the next week or month or season, but the path is there. It's always been there. And if it's going straight up right now, it is still a path, and that's enough for me. And it should be enough for us. Faith in a time of COVID-19. Put your hand in the crevice. Put your foot on the rock. Take a step. There's another crack. Take another step. Lie on your belly. Pant. Sweat. Then get up and do it all over again. We're Fountain Street Church. That's what we do. Amen and amen. Well, that's my message for this morning. I'm going to invite Phil to come back over here to give you some music as we move away from this. I want to lift up a prayerful moment. I don't have the names of our ancestors today. That's one of the things we can't do as much. But one of the things I have done for years now is lift up their actual names. So we remember the ancestors who made this place and gave us this gift. And also to take heart that we are running the race that they started. Lifting up all those whose names are written upon these walls, that are written upon our hearts, that are found engraved in our history. With gratitude for all that they did, knowing that there is so much more left for us to do. That the work is not ours to complete, but we are not allowed to lay it down. I say, God, living in the heavens heights, grant perfect rest underneath the wings of your Shekinah to our beloveds who have gone to their eternal rest. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter them beneath the wings of your presence, that they may be with you in peace, that we may live with them in peace, and may we ever say amen. We'll be back next week, all of us, all of you, as we consider the question, hope in a time of COVID-19. This is Fountain Street Church, and I'll give it now to Phil Pletcher, who will, with the notes of Mendelssohn, send you back into the day. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for being Fountain Street Church.